Welcome to the Beat Reporter's Inbox on MLB.com, presented by Edward Jones. My name is Jason Beck. I'm the MLB.com Tigers beat reporter. Natalie's here with me asking the questions. Let's get right to it. Natalie, what's the first question we got?
All right, Jason, the first question is from Chad. Is there a clear-cut number one draft pick this year? And if not, who are some of the likely names the Tigers will be considering?
Well, if you talk to scouts around the league, and even if you talk to Tigers people right now, the consensus likely candidate for the number one pick right now is Casey Mize, the pitcher out of Auburn. It's not necessarily a superstar draft. I think the Tigers were hoping somebody would emerge as like a clear-cut, preferably superstar hitter, because the Tigers do have some depth in their farm system in terms of starting pitching. But the one guy who's really separated himself is Mize. He's shown some very good stuff, and he's been able to pitch very well against high-level college hitters in the SEC. So I think the Tigers would like to take a position guy, but the way Mize has pitched, and I think the way that the college hitting crop has performed so far, really, unless something crazy happens, you're going to see Mize at that top spot when the pick comes around here, coming up on June 4th. What do you got next?
All right, the second question is from Adair. If the Tigers are truly trying to rebuild their farm system, especially thin on position players, why are they not more active on the international market?
That's a good question, because the Tigers for years have gone with a philosophy of spreading out their international pool money for quantity rather than necessarily dumping most, if not all of it, on one guy. It's been a little bit different the way you've seen a lot of what other organizations do. They try to go for not necessarily the top guys, like the top one or two. You see them more going for top 30 guys, maybe a little bit beyond that, in the hopes that by signing multiples of those guys, maybe 5 or 6 rather than 1 or 2, they have a better chance at making it big on one of those guys, or even just getting 2 or 3 contributors out of one crop rather than putting all your eggs in one basket on one player. You saw them transition a little bit away from that here this past summer. You saw them spend a little bit more on Pedro Martinez's son, who's a pretty highly touted guy for them. They put up 6-figure bonuses for a couple other guys. And if you listen to what the reports are going into this year's period, which begins on July 1st or 2nd, I believe, they're going to be pretty aggressive. And again, it's not necessarily going to be those top 3 or 4 guys, but I would be surprised if you don't see them signing at least a couple guys in the top 25 to 30, and probably sign some guys beyond that. So they're trying to become a little bit more aggressive on that, especially on the position end. They really want to find that hitter to go with the crop of young pitching they've assembled so far in the farm system, and which they'll most likely supplement in the draft with Mize.
The third question for you, Jason, comes from Keith. What is the latest with Miguel Cabrera?
That's kind of the big question around the Tigers these days. And right now, he was eligible to come off the DL yesterday. He obviously did not come off the DL. He's yet to start resuming work on the field, aside from some light jogging. It's not so much the hamstring right now, which is what landed him on the DL. The issue right now is that he encountered some back stiffness while doing some of the rehab work with the stretching and even running a little bit on the treadmill. So given the issues that he had with his back for most, if not all, of last year, they want to get that quieted down a little bit before they push him out on the field and get him doing more baseball activities again. They're still hoping to get that going within the next day or two. And once that starts, knowing Miguel, it probably shouldn't take too long for him to get back into what he considers playing shape, what he considers timing at the plate. And then hopefully in the coming days, you'll see him ready to come off the DL and get back in the Tigers lineup.
This question comes from Terry. Could the Tigers trade Michael Fulmer?
Could they? Yes. Will they? I think that's the big mystery, and I think a lot of it depends on what type of offers they would get as we get closer to the non-waiver trade deadline in July. Really, this is something they've entertained ever since last summer. His issues with the elbow and with the nerve being irritated last summer kind of quieted a lot of the trade interest. What he's done so far, while it's been a little up and down, has at least shown that he's healthy. So I would expect the interest to rekindle, much like it was and beyond what it was during the offseason. The question is, can they get the elite prospects that they would want to justify, trading a guy who still is coming into his own and still has a lot of prime years left, and still has, more importantly, has 3 more years beyond this season of contractual control. It's asking a lot to give up a guy that young, that talented, and a guy who isn't going to hit the open market anytime soon. But I think especially when you look at what's going on with the draft, as I explained before, the Tigers need elite hitting in their farm system to supplement the pitching. If they can't get it in the draft and they can't necessarily get it on the international market, the trade front is really what they're going to have to look at in order to get that hitter to round out what I guess you would consider the next generation of a Tigers contending team. If they can get that elite hitter in a trade package for Fulmer, in a package that would require multiple prospects, I think you at least have to listen to it. Again, I don't know if that's going to pop up. A lot of it depends on what the market will bear. But if they can get the offers they're looking for, I think you almost have to entertain it at this point.
Jason, the 5th question comes from Jarrett. What is the plan for Daniel Norris moving forward?
Right now, what they want to do is he's got to do the surgery rehab right now, and that's going to be several more weeks. He was hoping, I believe the timetable that Daniel gave us was about 6 to 8 weeks. They put him on the 60-day DL when he went through surgery at the end of April. So you're looking at end of June at the very earliest before he comes back. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little bit more cautious with him, just because it's been such a nagging injury for him. And given their situation, given the fact that they have a little bit of depth in starting pitching, maybe not elite depth, but enough guys to cover innings for them, that they're going to want to make sure that he's close to, if not right at 100% before they bring him back. This is a big stretch for him. Once he comes back down the stretch, they want to see what he can do when he's completely healthy, so that they can make a fair judgment on him before we get to the point where some of these pitching prospects, like Bo Burrows, like Kyle Funkhauser, like Franklin Perez, start knocking on the door on the big leagues next season. So there's a plan there, but I wouldn't expect him back quickly. And I think it's probably going to be late summer before we really start talking about him coming back into the rotation or the bullpen, depending on what they decide to do.
Greg's question is, hi Jason, great to see you on the air today. What is it like to be around a team during a rebuild? ... Greg in Chicago.
It's a unique situation. I was actually around the last rebuild during 2003, 2004, 2005. It's interesting in that the individual games don't have nearly as much riding on them because you're not talking about a playoff contender. But what you're looking for is how guys grow up, how guys go through growing pains, what they learn from different lessons. And it's interesting to watch guys grow as players and see if they progress to what the potential says they should grow into. So in that sense, it's a lot different than what I've covered over the last several years. But in some ways, it's a little bit refreshing. And I think what you try to look for is the enthusiasm and how guys handle struggles. That was a big thing going back to 2003 when they lost 119 games, was how do guys react to those types of struggles day in and day out? And it affects different guys very differently. Some guys had a hard time recovering from it, and you didn't see them around in the long term. Other guys, Jeremy Bonderman comes to mind because he lost 19 games that year. Other guys respond to it. Other guys are motivated by it. And other guys, it really doesn't affect them. They really focus on their own individual games and what they're trying to gain individually, because they know there's going to come a time down the road where those wins and losses in individual games matter a lot more than they do right now.
Jason, this next question comes from Travis. With the good start to the season, could the front office look to add and improve the bullpen?
I would be surprised if they do it. I wouldn't rule it out simply because if there's a young reliever that comes out there, either on waivers or in the trade front, I think they would have to consider it. But I wouldn't expect them to do anything in terms of getting a rental arm, a guy who's going to be a free agent coming up. I think what they're looking for the long term, guys who fit in not only right now, but like 2-3 years down the road. And they believe that they have the pieces to put together a pretty good bullpen, not just with Joe Jimenez, but with Brian Garcia once he comes back from Tommy John, with Zach Reininger, with Gerson Moreno once he gets through some of the growing pains he's going through right now with AA Erie. So what you look for when you get to the open market and with the trade market is how do guys complement those guys who you would expect to be coming up here in the next couple of years. And you don't get a whole lot of guys like that, but if one of those do happen to come around, then I think you could see them getting active a little bit.
Jason, this next question comes from Brian. How long before we see Christian Stewart in the majors?
Well, he's off to a great start in Toledo, and he's knocking on the door, certainly. I think it's going to be wild, not because of the bat, but because they want him to progress defensively and to keep learning lessons day in and day out at AAA Toledo rather than in the big leagues. I know some people have brought up the idea that his future is going to be a DH. I don't think the Tigers can do that. I don't think the Tigers believe they can do that. One, because I think long term you're going to have to at least reserve that DH spot for Miguel Cabrera, at least part-time, to get him off his feet and still keep his bat in the lineup every day as he ages. But also because DH is a tough spot for a young hitter because you're going to go through growing pains with your at-bats. When you're playing in the field, you get to kind of block out your bad at-bats by focusing on defense in the other innings. When you're a DH, all you think about between at-bats is that previous at-bat, and it can wear on guys, and it's not for everybody. And while I do think Stewart has a chance to hit very well in the big leagues, most hitters go through these growing pains for the first year or so. Immediate success is not automatic. And to put a guy like that through those struggles in a DH scenario is awfully tough to ask for. So while I think you might see him down the stretch, maybe as a September call-up, I wouldn't expect to see him up here in the near future. Not quite yet. I think they want him to go through this and to make sure that he has a spot defensively that he can hold down, at least at a major league average level before they give him the call.
This question is from Andrew and is, who is the Tigers' second baseman of the future?
Right now, the second baseman of the future is actually here, though he's not necessarily playing second base every day. Joel Lugo got the call-up when Jeimer Candelario went on the DL. He was a third baseman when he came over from Arizona in the J.D. Martinez trade. He's got a good arm for any infield position. I think it plays a little bit better at second base. He's got some good range for a guy of his size. The question is going to be, can he hit consistently? There's some promise there. He didn't necessarily get off to a sterling start numbers-wise at AAA Toledo, but the Tigers believe he can grow into the role. I don't think he's going to stick right now. I think once Candelario is ready to come off the DL, you'll probably see Lugo go back. Right now it's more a question of, you need Lugo up here for depth purposes. Late in the game, if you need a pinch hitter or somebody gets hurt and you need a replacement, goodness knows they've had enough injuries during games lately that they want to make sure they're covered. But long term, I think they want to give him a little bit more time in Toledo. This is his first year to AAA level before they bring him up here for good. I would expect that next year, assuming Jose Iglesias moves on as a free agent or in a trade, you'll see Dixon Machado move over from second to short, which is a more natural position. And then you've got an everyday spot for Lugo, assuming everything goes to plan. And that should do it. Thanks for watching the B Reporters Inbox on MLB.com, and tune in again next time.